I sent out an agenda and some other supporting documents. Apologies that I didn't get it to everybody until yesterday. But did everybody have a chance to at least take a peek? Okay, awesome. So then we have at least a starting place. So we have new members of this committee since the last time we met. So I recognize that all the board members know each other, but we can share our names. And then we'll let Christina introduce herself. So I think I know everybody here, but I'm Corey Dugas.
Pete Petrusky.
Bill Cooney. Mike Harelchek.
Mike Pastors.
Alicia Malchiotti.
And I'm Christina Ronald. I'm the head of adult services.
Thanks. And then we also have one other staff member that's on the committee, Michelle Boydell. I'm sorry, I can never remember how to pronounce that, but she is not able to come today, but she'll be joining us for the rest of the time. So in the agenda, I'm hoping that this is just kind of us chatting about what we're thinking about these different issues and getting an idea. So the first thing that I had on the agenda was establishing the parameters for the long-range plan. And then I realized the language that I used in here is confusing because I have length of plan. And what I mean by that is how long this plan is planning into the future. The old one was 5 years, which has been extended. So now it's technically on its 8th year or 9th year. And it is really no longer valid unless folks want to chime in and add things that they think should be carried over. So a lot has changed in the thinking, and you all come to this from different perspectives about how long the long range plan should be, how long of a period of time we're planning for. So does anybody want to chime in with their suggestions on how long you think we should be planning out?
Is there any kind of stipulation or best practice that we can start from on that? See if that sounds reasonable or not.
We can do whatever we want from the state. You know, it doesn't have to be a 5-year plan. It can be a 3-year or 4-year plan. It could be a 10-year plan if that's what we're really committed to. I don't think that's the direction that we probably want to go, is planning that far out, but we can consider.
My general just thought is, it seems to me that I'm thinking about what's the purpose of a long range plan, right? And so, we just have normally, I'm thinking of, from the board perspective, but we have our kind of, our monthly business that we're dealing with. And there's, just the regular, approving, annually improving the budget and all that stuff. The long range plan, it seems like, we're trying to set, some priorities that are going to take more time to accomplish, but I think it seems like it's most useful if it can be somewhat concrete, if it's not just kind of vague. It's not a mission statement. It's not just a aspirational something, but it's concrete. It's like, we really want to actually do these things, but it's going to take more than just a few months to kind of get this underway. This is something that's going to take planning. It's going to take things we want to get taken care of, or things that need to be budgeted for over a few years. It's something, not something necessarily will take a long time, but something that we've got to, work into the budget and plan to actually pay for it and do it or whatever. So somewhat concrete. And I think the further out you go, the less it can really be concrete and less useful it is. But that said, it might be, so I would think the focus would be on the relatively shorter time period, 3 to 5 years, maybe something like that. But I don't think there's, maybe it would be useful to have the main focus of the plan be those concrete things in the relatively shorter term, but also have a little thing after that saying, here are some even longer range things that we are, thinking about or should be, because I think, when we talk about long range plan, one of the longer long range things is, again, eventually, we just went through our major construction and renovation project just, a couple of years ago now. But, eventually this building will have an end of its useful life or whatever. We'll need another major renovation or a move to a new building or a new construction or something or whatever. That's kind of way in the future at this point. Hopefully it's quite a long ways out, but it's something we might want to, flag in a long range plan and say, well, right now we think we, should have another 20, 25 years, whatever, in this building, but, we want to start thinking about what comes next. And, it'll be a few more years before anything starts getting put in any kind of concrete terms, but we want to think about those things that are further out. And maybe there's things in between there that we
Mhm.
want to kind of flag as, here's the priorities for the next 3 to 5 years. Here are some things that, we'd like to work toward in future terms that are less concrete. I don't know, I'm just
So
kind
are you thinking of this as sort of like an addendum to the plan? Like we have this extra section that is like forward thinking, or this is something for us to keep internally?
I was thinking it could, I don't know. I guess either way, it could potentially, if, I guess it goes back to the question of what's our purpose for the long range plan? Why are we doing this? And I don't necessarily have.
Because the state
The
requires.
state requires it, right? But if we're going to take that requirement and kind of make let's make the most of it. If we have to do this, let's make something that's that's worthwhile and serves a purpose.
So it sounds like you want to do like tangible goals, like 3 years, and then anything after that more like not existential, but more
Aspirational.
aspirational,
Yeah.
pie in the sky. Like it would be great if we could do these additional things, but here's the core goals and measurable achievements we're gonna do in this 3 years, and then everything else is like.
Maybe, that's, just, again, and this is just, this is, just my, not fully formed thoughts on this that I'm throwing out there, but.
Well, you touched on a lot of things I've seen be successful elsewhere. Just the way I think of this document is it's not just a planning document for us, but in 5 years, because I would say we shouldn't do less than 3. I wouldn't want to do more than 5. But in 5 years, we might have a new director, we might have a new board. And when they pick up the document, to your point, it's like, okay, what were they working on and what did they flag for us? And it helps to bridge that gap when you bring in new leadership. In a perfect world, we wouldn't achieve everything in the plan because it should be, our reach should exceed our grasp. And some of these things should be like, oh, we're going to kick that to the next plan, so it's worth doing, or we didn't have the resources. But that kind of naturally happens as we start planning the new plan. We'll look at what we've done and we're like, oh, we didn't build a new building, but we're 4 years closer, so let's put it on the next plan. Let's roll it forward. So in terms of why are we doing this as a planning document, whoever comes next will thank us for this.
And as far as the, the length or, the duration or how far are we going to reach, it might be something to think about is, we might plan out, say, 5 years with the hope of our next plan coming in 3 years, we've planned out our long range plan, for the next, say, 5 years, but we're not going to wait a full 5 years before we revisit it and start working forward. It can kind of, there's some overlap when you're saying, okay, we've gotten some of this stuff done, some of it we're still working on. Let's keep planning forward as we go,
I would just think that the 3 year is probably the best operational timeframe, but with respect to things that go beyond that, it would be things that we would start to have to work on in that 3 year, realizing that they would not come to fruition during those 3 years. So, but it would be something that we sort of have to do something on now that will be developed in a more concrete proposal later. But think about it that way. We're always thinking about things that we as a board are, and as a library are going to be sort of focused on during that 3 year period, some to get done during that period, and some that will be work in progress towards a longer term.
Christina, from a staff perspective, how far do you see the librarians and the library staff planning out and thinking towards the future?
My gut is saying I like a 3 year right now. I think things are changing so rapidly in libraries that, and we've, after going through the building renovation and leadership change, I think it would be nice to assess after 3 years, like, how did we do, where are we at, and keep building on like the direction we go. My gut says a 3.
Okay.
I do agree that no less than 3, no more than 5 is what I've kind of been seeing. That makes sense to me.
I'm a big fan of a 3 year plan, but it does require the process of creating it to be established again. If we have a process that we think works well, that could be an easy transition, but I'm okay with advocating. I definitely am in the no more than 5 years, absolutely, but. Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Oh, Hi, Barbara.
This is Barb. I couldn't get in with the video, so here I am on the phone. I'd like the 3-year idea.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear us?
Oh,
I can hear you well.
Good, good.
okay. Got you in there as a note. Anything else before we move on to the next thing?
I don't know what they were doing before, but were there ever like periodic check-ins on progress on the plan?
Not as, I mean, I don't know that we're the best group to speak to this since Mike is the oldest standing person. Well, Barb might know now that she's on the call. Do you remember Barbara, on the last strategic plan, if there were any periodic check-ins that were happening about the progress?
No, not that I recall, no. There should have been, but there weren't.
Because I think a 3-year span gives you enough time to, through those 3 years, check in, say, are we doing what we need to do? Or if environments changed, pivot your plan.
In a perfect world, we would operationalize this so that it kind of fits in with everything we're doing. There'd be like a long range plan section of the board meetings, staff meetings would have long range plan check-ins. You want to make it as normal as possible, because if you're like, oh, let's just do a quarterly check-in, then you miss one, you forget, suddenly it's 6 months later and you're like, where were we? And you really want to embed it in the organization.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet.
Yeah, I think hopefully we can establish kind of what that looks like, and that can come out of the plan is actually the process, which kind of folds into the next 2 items that are on here, both. And when I say length, I mean actual number of pages and format of the plan, and then metrics. I think of both of those things together. So I know that Bill has a copy of the old long range plan with him. I saw him flipping through it. And it's pretty lengthy and has a lot of very specific things in there. And I think, sort of the way that planning goes now is that that's not really how things are traditionally structured, because it's not the most effective way to do it. How many pages are?
6. Christina, I know right before, not to put you on the spot,
Sure.
right before we came in here, I know you were
Yes.
looking at some of our neighbors.
I was looking at Bethlehem Colony and Albany, and theirs are 2 to 4 pages
Mhm.
for most recent ones.
Thank you, that's helpful. I would like things to be tightened up a little bit for us to build some metrics in there, and I can speak to that more, but I would love to hear from you all about how you have seen functional strategic plans, what your experience is, and how you kind of think it should be formatted.
Do not have a lot of experience with strategic plans, so.
Nor do I. I don't know what really best practices in this area are. My only thing is, coming back to something I mentioned earlier, is I think it's important to be, to some degree, to be as concrete as we can, or able to be, or give, goals that we can kind of make concrete and, because, it has to actually, if we want it to actually serve a function of kind of guiding, what the library is actually doing, like things that are just too vague or too, aspirational, I don't think that helps.
So I think for the document itself, you want to really highlight the high level things, and we can put concrete elements in there because I think the community is going to expect that. They don't want like a bunch of fluff. They want to know, what are you actually doing with my library? It's not all that different from doing an evaluation or from doing like a personal development plan. I've seen it work really successfully where, like, if you take our old one, for example, we have foster community connections, embrace and celebrate the diversity of our community. That's fine for this type of document. On the back end, the staff and the board working on it would have almost like an Excel spreadsheet that really breaks down like the SMART goals. Okay, what does that actually mean? How do we know we've accomplished it? And then I've seen it used with the traffic light model where it's, red, yellow, green. Green, everything's going great. We're on target. Yellow, somebody needs to intercede. There's a roadblock, something's happened. Red, we have to look at this, like there's a problem. We might have to abandon ship. But that's again, as we're operationalizing it, the documents, they become two distinct documents.
Yeah, I like them.
So Barbara, were you gonna say something earlier? Did you want to chime in?
Say that again?
I just didn't know if you were gonna say something earlier. We cut you off.
No,
Okay,
no, we're fine.
okay.
Thank you.
I am by no means saying that the organization that I work for has the best possible way to do strategic planning, but it does give us a different idea of how to think about this. I've been doing this for like 15 years, and this is like what we've ended up with. I don't know if I can bring it up on the computer at the same time if we're.
We can't share it with video.
Okay. Don't worry about it if we can. Okay. Okay, so like I said, again, this is not like I'm not suggesting that Gilderland do theirs in the same way. We can call this whatever we want. We call it a strategy articulation map, which is kind of word salad. But we put our vision above our mission because it's our tagline, and include our values. But what really gets at the heart of what this strategic plan kind of has to do is our goals that run across the one section right there. And we currently have 6 of them, and they are as distinct as we could possibly make them. And then under each of those, we have initiatives that need to be done. This is all public facing stuff too. So there are very specific initiatives that need to happen. And then we have metrics that are built into the plan. So we can actually determine if we're successful. So I am not suggesting that we use this exact same format because I don't know that it works for a public library, but these concepts I think are important for us to use because there is so much in the old plan that's not really measurable other than like checking yes or no. So I think like using these sort of strategies might be helpful for us, but I'm not committed to it. Internally, we have much like what Pete suggested, and I can't bring it up, but we have a document that we check in on every other month, and it has progress. Alicia knows all about like all this kind of stuff in her job, but like we have our progress for each of these, and it gets another like line. So that's like what happens internally, that those of us that are working on it can see. But this is what's on the public facing side. So again, I'm not suggesting that we do this exact same format. But I am just suggesting that we kind of think about it in a different way if people are open to it. So you don't have to leave that up anymore. I just don't know how to take it down.
It's like.
Oh, yeah. So sort of, I think this is going to frame like sort of how long we expect this to be, but how do people feel about building initiatives and metrics in to the plan along with the goals? Yeah. We should.
I think that that's something similar to what you just showed there would be a good operative framework for making something that's tangible, realistic, as opposed to just aspiration.
Yeah, we've just found like internally, like we have large board, you know, and all that kind of stuff. We've just found internally, this is like the easiest way to track it and actually make sure we we hit our goals. We have rolled things over. Like it didn't get done in this 3-year strategic plan, and we don't beat ourselves up. We just realize other things were prioritized and then roll it into the next one if it's still of importance. But yeah, I think that's one way that we can kind of think about it, but are there other ideas?
I wanted to ask, can I put in a request to join this committee?
I'm not sure how that works.
What is that? What is that? Just because I have a lot of experience with this, like with my libraries and my teaching and strategic planning, and I'm fascinated by this, so I have a lot of experience that I feel could help with that, with what you guys are doing, so.
I feel like
That's
that's
why
why
I'm-
by the bylaws, it would have to wait until next year.
I know, that's what, I have to check the bylaws, Mike, but I will
Okay.
check them and kind of
Okay,
get.
just a request.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Is there, I don't know what's the number of,
I know,
committee that's in the bylaws.
Well, you can always come to the meeting.
Yeah.
like,
yeah, you're always
Tend
welcome.
to
All the
participate.
meetings are open. Yeah, it's just
You
a
know,
non.
In theory,
voting.
yeah, you wouldn't have to
That's it.
vote when there's something to vote on, but you can participate in all the conversations, discussions and everything, just like anybody else, so.
Okay,
Well,
yeah, I didn't mean to.
And ultimately, like the amount of things that this committee will vote on internally are probably not that high. But,
Sorry, I didn't mean to disrupt.
no, you're fine.
no, and I think, I think what you showed ties into like what I've experienced, like goal setting for like projects. They just, and the terminology is called agile, but we use the same thing, SMART goals. We have something similar to what you have, but instead of using a spreadsheet, we use, they call them Kanban boards. So it shows where in the process something is. And then what would be cool is at the end, any lessons learned. So if there were things that didn't succeed or things that did succeed, maybe there's takeaways and then that gets baked into how we now pivot for the next plan. So it doesn't seem arbitrary, it seems more thoughtful. So just something to like, when we do our check-ins, when things are yellow, how did we pivot and was that successful? And that's somewhere like people can reference later and not like, why did they change it? We have no idea. And like, you can only glean so much from like a meeting minute versus like, here's some lessons learned and wherever we want to house those, like I can make some suggestions on how we do it, but you know, the software world, but that is like the whole basis for how we do that framework. It's like you're constantly pivoting and constantly, it's like trying new things early and failing fast and then changing, you know? So I think that kind of sets that up and just how we follow through on that would be just a procedural thing, but I think that's clear and concise and not paragraphs of things that people might not ever look at or read.
It's much cleaner to visualize that way too, because you go top to bottom, like what's the high end thing we're doing? We're X. Okay, what's the tactic? What's the metric? Like it, depending on the interest level of whoever's reading it, it's still one sheet of paper, but they can follow it straight down and see the logical progression.
Yeah.
So when we're getting into accountability, we can be like, look at the metrics we accomplished and they're all in service of this goal. Yeah, I think especially for when you're talking to other stakeholders, when we're talking to our staff, being able to visualize it very easily, because 6 pages doesn't seem like a lot for a library staff to read, but it is, whereas opposed to an easy visualization, people pick it up right away and go, oh, okay, you know?
Yeah.
We want to make it as simple as possible for people to see the progress we're making.
And I think we could still add an additional section that's that pie in the sky section, like here's some bonus things we'd like to like start focusing on that are just larger concepts. And just saying like whatever we make progress on, we'll bake into our next set of actual like SMART goals if we can get to these extra things. So I think we can have the best of both worlds there and do a 3-year and then the plus the bottom.
It seems like the concepts can be big if the metrics you build in and how you break down, like what does that concept actually look like, are specific.
Yeah.
I don't know what the best practice is, but it's like, it's almost like our primary goals could be lofty as long as you say like, this is what that means to the library. And then that's measured by X, Y, Z.
Yeah, that's the, forgot the acronym for SMART, but I know that like concept of it. And basically it's like, is this a reasonable goal you can achieve in 3 years? And then what are those things? Like you can't just say, we want to bring in more patrons, because that could be one person signs up in the whole 3 years and you're like, done. But if you say like, if you put a percentage, if you put a, you know, it has to be more specific. So when you cut it down, like, yeah, we can't achieve that. And it is a, you know, a goal worth mentioning versus like, oh, cool, how many people you sign up here? Technically it went up.
And it's easy to sort of fall into this pattern, you know, with plans that these are things that are sort of not lofty goals. They're just sort of like how things should be operating, but you include them because they can easily be checked off. And I don't really know if that's what we want the goal of our plan to be, but maybe we do.
There's got to be an element of that.
There has to be some, yeah. Yeah.
It's just not, there's just got to be the things that are here and now in the first year that we're going to be doing. You know, it's, long-term starts tomorrow, right?
Well, and as we get into staff involvement, I think that balance is really important because we want things that are practical for the staff, that they know and understand, that they already support, and they're like, oh, that's no big deal, that's part of what they do. While also giving them those aspirational ones to help kind of grow them, to be like, okay, see the success is building, now try this harder thing, this bigger thing.
Well, that's when I think that check-ins will be helpful, because how do you know if you're on the right track at any given moment if it's never checked in on? So if we set a like quarterly or every 6 months, oh, hey, look, this is how much progress we've made or didn't make, and then that trickles down to like a staff meeting or so, and then we're all on the same page. We can all align. Like that's the big thing, is like getting this bunch of different groups of people all in alignment and all tuned into like where we're at and like whether we're doing well with the plan or not. So those check-ins will help with that as well, just so everyone's looped in.
Okay. A lot of this part, like this beginning part of us thinking about how we want to do it is a little pie in the sky because we don't have any information to do it. But at least helps make sure we're on the same page. Is there anything anybody else has like just general about the parameters of what we want the plan to look like?
Just, I'd just say, a long-range plan should be a long-range plan. It shouldn't be something we're changing like every year.
Mhm.
You gotta have something that you're shooting for. So that's sort of a calibration on how much aspiration to put in this versus how much concrete, because certain things are gonna change. But you don't wanna be revisiting the long-range plan every year, because then it's not a long-range plan. It's just an operational document that changes with whatever your whims are of that time. And so I just had put that in there.
Okay, let's talk board involvement. So I know Mike, Bill, and Alish participated in the board involvement that happened last year. So that's 4 out of the 7 of us that are in the room, but the others did not. So I think I had offered a little clarity on what that was in the email. But I shared with you the results of that board visioning statement and the results of the board survey and activity conducted. And I should clarify, and I actually talked to Barbara about this. The board activity also did include the administrative staff members that were in the room during the board meeting. So there were a number of them. Probably like at least 5 that also participated. And I said, go ahead, they all got stickers. And so some of the activity stuff is skewed. It's not just board, but the survey part was just the board. So when you see those numbers, my instinct is much has changed in 1 year, and that may not be our general sort of vision from the board. And I don't know if we want to repeat the same activity and survey, consider a different survey and or activity, or if you want to roll off of the information that we already have.
My own view on it is what you just said. A lot has changed. And, I think we need to revisit the survey, and I think we need to redo this exercise that we did. But I think we need to give it maybe a little bit more time and a little bit more preparation of the board before they come in, and understanding what the rules of putting the stickers on. Because I thought last year it was really very condensed period of time for a big amount of thinking that we're going to be living off of. And if you understand the strategy of how to put the stickers on,
You
it's not
can
like
skew
the
those
board,
results.
You're here, and all of a sudden you find, oh, no, my things I thought were most important deemed by anybody else to be most important. I should have put all my stickers on something else. So I just think we should rerun that exercise completely, given all that's changed and the number of new people that we have and the amount of grounding that we have and what the rules of the game will be. We should see the game board before we go in so that we can go in and have thoughtful inputs in where we're putting those things and then evaluate where people's thoughtful inputs are versus, you know, what you thought was each individual was the appropriate thing.
Is our impression that we have good buy-in from the current board to do that? Part of the reason that I'll admit that I sprung that activity on the board last year is because there were several members of the board that like did not want to attend a special meeting to do long-range planning. And so I threw it into the board meeting to sort of force participation.
So here's my 2 cents on it. There's still people who will come in unprepared because inevitably not everybody gets a chance to read things in advance. So might just be repeating the same thing with getting the same results. And based on doing the farmer's market for 2 years in a row, at least from a community standpoint, these are all the same points that have been brought up so many times that I don't expect this to change a whole lot. And I'm not the biggest fan of like churning our wheels on a process because I like to get something like pen to paper and get something going. If it doesn't drag out the process, it doesn't hurt to do it again, but it might come out different. It might be the same, but I have a strong suspicion it'll be pretty similar priorities.
When did we do the last one?
Not last November. I
Early
think.
November, before Tim announced he was leaving.
Before Tim announced he was
Before
leaving.
we knew
Yes.
what was gonna, you know, we all.
What
had,
exploded with the cafe, yeah.
we all had rosy feelings about the cafe and, you know, there's just a number of things that are in here that are, I just think it needs to be done.
I guess, you know, I'm just trying to, you know, I'm thinking about like what's the process of getting from, you know, survey results and things like this to kind of, you know, specific, you know, goals that we can, you know, make actionable and concrete. And that's the part that I'm not totally clear on, you know, that is, not that there's not value of getting input from the community and the board and whatever, and trying to like figure out what our priorities are, but to get like, you know, suppose we have, you know, survey results that we're, you know, satisfied with or happy with or whatever, how do we get from,
Yeah. How do we get from like all of this information into like a realistic amount?
right, so I kind of want to like.
Yeah.
Like before I kind of can figure out in my own head whether I think it makes sense to like, you know, go back to the drawing board and do new surveys and do whatever. I want to kind of have a sense of like, is this just a brainstorming activity that, you know, like, and if it's really just kind of a brainstorming activity to get the ideas on the paper and get, you know, a sense of kind of what are the, you know, things out there that people are concerned about, then I don't know that it makes sense to have to go back to the, you know, drawing board and do it all over again. But if we're really trying to use this to kind of tell us what our priorities are, and that's going to base where we go, then maybe we do need to update it and do it. But I don't, in my own head, I don't have a sense.
I think there's a happy medium because some of these are specific, and if they end up getting voted on again, they're pretty clear cut, whereas inviting interior spaces is so large. What could that mean to people? It might be a good exercise to give these categories to folks and have them provide ideas, and then we vote on these more succinct type ideas, because otherwise we'll just end up with lofty goals again, and then still have to do an additional exercise to narrow those things.
We're gonna have to do more than one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Just to be realistic. Sorry, I should have clarified that.
But-
Like in order to go through the
This was
process.
trustee and a few of the members of the staff that were there, but we also need to do the staff and we also need to do the community.
Yes.
And so, now, I don't really know, are we gonna do the same thing for each one of those three groups? Or, you know, would we basically really go to the community and say we did this a year ago? So I didn't, yeah, but once again, we're talking about process here. We're talking about process. And I think we need to follow up process of doing this, that we did this step, this step, this step, this step, and start the process by saying we're gonna take something off the shelf that was from last year well, yeah, major changes is just a bad first process step. So even if it, as Lee says, it comes out exactly the same, let's validate that and follow a process of trustees, employees, community.
And as far as my perspective, Mike, on how we get from like this big picture stuff and consolidate it into goals is like everything gets packed down until we see like out of all the groups, like what the priorities are and formulate them into goals. It's a lot of like statistical analysis, but I can show you, my data analyst has like a process document that she uses to go through like multiple inputs and pull it out. So I'll see if I can get the process document. It might help with like an understanding of how we could do it.
As food for thought, I have seen, like, I like the idea of doing 3 different versions. I think, you know, having 3 different stakeholder groups, it's more work, it's more effort. I think enough has changed, especially for the community and the staff, that we should do them again. And if we're doing those 2 again, you're in for a penny for a pound, do the board again. I have seen other organizations, I've worked for other organizations that just do it once. They do like a 2-day event and they're like, we're gonna build a team, like a sample that's members of the community, members of the board, members of the staff, and we're gonna use their outputs. It's a little bit faster but there are pluses and minuses to both. So I personally like the idea of doing all 3, but if we're like, oh my God, that's so much, we could do 1 and take 2 days and just do it.
Last time, did we get around to doing the staff in the community again? Okay, that's what I thought. So this is just the board and then the admin team that was there.
And we were gonna start with the staff in like late January, early February, and we did not.
And the 3 really works from working in the schools, like we did the teachers, the administrators, and like the parents in the community. So like doing all 3, and then once you got all the ideas, a lot of the ideas overlapped, and then you could get the similar goal that was similar across all 3. And then you could whittle it down until it's, you know, a manageable list from the 3 groups, so.
Because as a theoretical example, Alicia's point of like build a welcoming space, we might get people, like we've heard feedback, like, oh, our building's too corporate, our building's too boring. We get those individual pieces and we know as a team putting it together where we're like, oh, this all fits, this is all in the same bucket. What do we call that bucket? Welcoming space. Then people taking the survey don't have to worry about it. We just ask them, what do you think of our space? And then we identified the problem or the challenge, the need.
And really the like 3-4 paragraph thing, the typed up thing, that was just me putting into a narrative format the things that the group hit on. Like it was never intended to be like, all of this is incorporated. Some people connect better with numbers and some people connect better with language. So I like numbers, but other people like language.
It's like they read books for fun, right?
So now that Pete brought up something that's like sort of alternative to what I had been thinking, and perhaps you had been, would you rather consolidate this into an intense like 2 days of working with a variety of people?
Would you structure, what would that mean? You know, everybody take time off of work to come in to do what?
Or you take time on the weekend, but yeah, it becomes a community event essentially. It's an intense couple of days. And we would either want to have somebody act as moderator or, you know, the person pulling it together and orchestrating it. Or we want to hire somebody, like you want somebody to be in charge of the room.
So just, again, I hate to use my organization as an example. We do all of our like community staff input and the boards complete the survey. We do kind of a 3-part thing, but then the board does have a retreat every 3 years in which all that information is gathered. They coalesce around the primary goals. Taking into consideration everything. We make all these crazy Venn diagrams of like where everything fit between our different groups. But my board does commit to doing like a full 8-hour day to come up with the priorities based on everybody else. That It can be this committee, it doesn't have to be that long, but that does require the legwork up front.
So I'm just like, we're thinking of something that's very open-ended for like going to the staff or going to the community or whatever, like just a kind of open-ended questions that's just like having people give their priorities, or how are we looking to structure this, or?
It can be whatever we want. So I use this, the statements that I used in there before came from like libraries transforming communities, they came from the basic concept of that, the aspirations, challenges, and changes questions.
Okay.
Because they are very open-ended, I don't know. I feel like the staff is probably can very much also address those. I don't know about the community. So I don't know if we want to ask like a few broad questions, or if we want to do like a very traditional, like what has been done in the past at the library, like survey.
Whatever method we take, I would like to see what the community would say without us like providing leading things for them. I've found we've surveyed a few times in the past, and when you put pie in the sky on paper, if you're like, hey, do you want a nighttime story time? People will say, yeah, that sounds great. I'm not going to take my kids to that, but someone I know would really love that. And then they don't actually, like, that's not the real data. It's not the real thing that gets attended. So whatever we do, I would like to see it more open, where it's like, tell us specifically what your ideas are. Like, what do you want to see in the community anyway?
Yeah, I'll just mention as a person who had to write a lot of surveys for a job, when you make it too open-ended, someone has to now make that data points. And if someone can say, I want a nighttime story time, and I want an afternoon story time, is that two different votes, or is that a vote for a similar thing? It can get a little hairy kind of fast. The alternative to that is to whittle down options and have people prioritize them. So
I was
even
gonna say, how do you hit like a happy medium?
that's what I'm thinking, because when you leave something too open-ended, now putting all those data points together is so tedious, and maybe only 10 people fill it out and it's not so bad, maybe hundreds do, and that's a big time commitment. So sometimes you can whittle it down, and maybe the last point is the community, like maybe we do the staff and the board and we come up with some items and we give, here's 20 things, rank most highest priority to lowest. And if everybody puts nighttime storytime hours at the bottom, we don't have to focus on that, because we can only commit to maybe 10 of the things. So then, okay, so this didn't make it this time. In 3 years, if this now shows back up and is moving up, maybe people then realize like, oh shoot, I didn't vote for that. I actually do really want that.
And I do have statistical analysis software that will take all of the survey responses and to group them. So it will take, if we do open-ended, I have access to the software that will bundle it together and use this AI to interpret which things.
But do you know, like, for example, that afternoon hours versus night?
So it comes back to you with the question, and like in that situation, it would come back to me.
Okay.
So it would either have it broken out, like you can choose. So, but it would come back to me and say like that it registered story time and ask if these two things are a correlation or if they're, yeah. So it'll ask if you want them grouped. Somebody has to make a decision,
Right.
a human being, not an AI.
That's a very acceptable alternative to open-ended, if open-ended does. I just don't want to put leading stuff down there that people just check the box and say, I want it.
No, and I agree that can be, because obviously if you're like, do you want like 10 horses to be in the library at all times? I'd be like, yeah, that's kind of awesome, but not practical, like something that can happen. But what if everybody votes that number one? I don't know.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, so
Well, part of it is,
I think whittling it down, because the more you leave things open-ended, it can be messy. I don't know how many people to expect to respond to this, so I'm just throwing that out.
Oh, go ahead, Bill, while
No,
I.
I don't get, and the community responses to something like this, there's always the community that comes in the library or looks at the library webpage, but then there's the non-library community as well that, I mean, aspirationally, we want to get their input on as well, because it is their tax dollars and their complaints, their complaining tax dollars that you hear about a lot. So how do you
So
how do you target a community?
the last time the community was surveyed, like broadly, that was supposed to, I think, kind of help direct the long-range planning process, though chime in, because this is likely not the last time the community was surveyed, was August of 2022, which is when we we're supposed to start building the new plan. And there were 64 responses. So, I mean, at that, the percentage of those responses based on the total population of Gelderland,
Yeah.
which I just sent that chart around, so it's,
You know, I know it was a different situation, but back before the construction was done, the library held a bunch of like information sessions to have people come and give their, feedback on what they were looking for, what they wanted or whatever. And I think there was a lot more response on those. And
I'm
that
sure there was,
That was
they were
different.
asking for it, yeah.
it's different. It's different. It was a bigger project. It was a bigger thing, but, I'm just trying to think like.
That one was like one of the ones that was a bit leading. It was nice because we had, if I remember correctly, we had these easels in the lobby and it had a bunch of like, what do you want to see? And people had stickers. And so anyone who was just coming and going, it was like, oh, you can put the sticker on the thing you wanted.
There were
But
also-
the things were very specific.
I went to one of them that was like an evening session and it was like, I think it was like the architects or something, but it was before they had started the whole process. And they gave like a little presentation and just kind of, then it was like very open-ended and we're just asking everybody that was there to like, give their thought, things that they would like to see, things like that. And it was kind of like a brainstorming session that they were getting. And it was pretty well attended, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly.
I can't recall if that became the boards that I'm remembering or if they were two separate
I
things.
don't know. I don't remember.
But would that be like Pete's idea of having everybody come on like a day if a session like that is successful?
And, one thing that might, and I don't know if this would capture, would be maybe, if we started with the staff and the board and asked, on the kind of brainstorming side, asking people open-ended questions to the staff and the board, what are things you would like to see, changes, improvements, new things, new whatever, and kind of got input from the staff and the board, then kind of take everything that's get in and kind of try and group them into, a bunch of things, and then use that to try and get as much community response as we can on the ranking.
Mhm.
So the inputs of the ideas could come from the board, and, board members have talked to the public through, the farmer's market, other things, whatever, and staff talk with the public all the time when people come in and talk to them and whatever. But use that as the brainstorming part to get the list of ideas. And then once we have that kind of list of ideas kind of sorted out, then we try and do whatever we can do, whether it's surveys online, things here in the building, possibly like, I don't know whatever way we can think of to try and get that out to people. But if at that point, it would be about ranking. So it's not just like, oh, do I like this idea where people are like, oh, in the abstract, oh, that sounds nice. Oh, that's good. Oh, yeah, that sounds nice too. But ranking to say which of these are more important to you than the other ones.
Well, yeah, and I think when we were getting that open input, we stick to like trends of multiple people are saying something, because otherwise you'll end up with a really long list for ranking. Like,
Well,
I think you
yeah.
can bulldoze it and put a Chick-fil-A there. I don't want to put that
Right.
option on there, because one person said it, but that's just how I would pitch it, right, to folks is like, hey, we're going to be receiving, some input on what we are going to be doing for the next couple of years with the library. We're going to listen, and whatever like emerging commonalities are coming through, we're gonna whittle it down to 10 choices, then we'll put it back to you guys to prioritize. So then that way, if someone's like, oh, I don't want to see my Chick-fil-A idea on there, we're not like causing some bad blood there, because you may be the only person who said it, but 10 people said that they wanted a book sale on Saturday, so that made the list, because there was a, common thread there where multiple people were asking about that. So that's just a pitching it thing, because I don't want people to start going like, well, I didn't see my idea on this. Because we want to stick with something that's gonna be
Good sense to me.
popular, or Yeah, so just 2 cents there, but I think that that public input section would be a good way to gather that information without it being leading. And we just have to be diligent about tracking like recurring themes or suggestions that come up. And then do the ranking thing, like you said, just do the second wave, be like, hey, now here's our thing, like rank them some way. Survey Monkey or whatever we have access to.
So this would be, I mean, you've essentially landed on what I would suggest if I, if I was like making a suggestion, which is, I think that the board and the staff should do the same thing. Be that a generalized survey with the same sort of three, like type of, doesn't have to be the same questions, but the same broad questions. But they should be two separate surveys so that we can look at those data points separately. We can consider combining them, but at least we understand what the board's priorities are and how they do or don't mesh with what the staff's priorities are. And then I don't necessarily think the same thing should go out to the community because it's way too pie in the sky. So I would agree, either we hold some focus groups, either targeted or open sessions, open listening sessions to hear community feedback and gather that, analyze the information that comes through, and then look at all three of those pieces together. That would be my proposal, but that is, I mean, but that is a stretch to get all those things accomplished. We can certainly do them. They can get done quickly.
Well, I think it's more practical because I liked kind of how Mike was outlining it. One of the concerns that I've seen administrators and other librarians have is even our most engaged patrons do not know as much about the business of libraries as the staff and the public. That's why you get the kind of offbeat, like I want ponies, I want ice cream. And you end up wasting a lot of time because these people are like, well, I want a thing that they can't actually have. But there are questions you can ask that are open-ended for them. Like one we used in Arlington was, if you don't use the library, why not? And you get the answers that are helpful, like your hours are bad, your location's inconvenient, you don't have story times when I want them. And you can start gleaning things about your non-users from that. But I love the idea of the staff and the board engage first and kind of come up with the more like, these are things that are attainable, that we think are in our strategic mission, that are within the business of libraries. And then providing those to the public as a ranking to be like, what do you value more, flexible story times or, these things aren't necessarily competing, but like, do you want the building to be open more hours or do you want flexible story times? Which one's more important to you? And it helps the public too, because they don't want to feel silly coming in and being like, I don't know, I wish you had more books. Like we're giving them a direction.
Yeah. Would we feel comfortable tackling the board and staff piece and then having that help guide us as we process what we want to do with the community? Or do we want to establish all the steps in our plan right now?
I would be more comfortable seeing what we come up with and then seeing what we'd like to ask the public.
Do we want to kind of set a rough timeline for when we want to try to get things done by? Like goals for us?
Sure, I would love to set some SMART goals. Let's go.
Christina pulled up.
I did. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely.
And I think achievable used to be attainable, and I think they changed it.
That's why I'm like, I don't even,
I know.
I know the concept, but like trying to remember the
Same
acronym.
thing.
But it comes up a lot, or there's always something new. So I to do it.
So it depends on how we want to structure this. Do we think that the 3 questions that we used before are the questions that we should use going forward, or do we want to rethink how this is? The questions are, does somebody have it in front of them?
My aspirations for my library are, challenges we face in reaching these aspirations are, changes needed in my library to reach our aspirations are.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure, because I think some of those, like the challenges we face, like those are things that, I think once we've decided on a goal that we think is a goal that we want to, try and shoot for, then we have to figure out what the obstacles are and how we, that's like, some, that, I don't know if that seems like that's a later step, or I don't know. I think the first step is just to figure out what do we want to do? Like, what do we need? Like, what are we trying to do?
I get that. But I would be curious as to if the staff see different challenges than we do. Like that's the, but
Yeah.
so I don't know if we should gather it at the same time or if that's like part of a later, because I feel like, and I don't want to generalize, I'm sorry, we have one staff person here, and so I'm like, Christina's here, what does she say? But I feel like our ideas of what the challenge, as a board, what the challenges are probably different than the library's ideas, which are like, we don't have the staff to do these other things, or we don't have the resource, whatever it is.
And I think going back to like what our goals are that we need to accomplish, right? Like some of the things we were talking about, like on doing looking at the community to do priorities and things like that. Now, I mean, ultimately, we're providing services to the community, like that's our whole purpose and that's what we're doing. But some of the goals we might set in this long range plan might not be directly community facing things. There might be internal things to the library that the staff might be concerned about, just the workflow or interpersonal things or or who knows what, anything that are internal things that are still important, long range things that we need to do to serve that ultimate purpose, but they're not going to be things that the public is going to necessarily care about or put on a priority board or whatever, because it's not things they see.
Mhm.
So I don't know how you incorporate that into the whole, but that was kind of a.
No. I mean, I
But-
personally appreciate it. I'm also one of those people that's like, I'd rather gather more data than need to come back to you and ask for.
I just feel like there's a, what do we want to accomplish is like question number one, and then like, what do we need to do to get there is kind of the second, like, that's like, part, like, and some of these, like, like what are, the aspirations is kind of that question number one, like, what are we trying to do here? What do we want to do? And, challenges we face or things we need to do, that's kind of, well, that's what we have to figure out. Once we've decided, yeah, we want to do this, then we got to figure out what are the steps we need to do to accomplish that and what's in our way to get there. But it's figuring out that first part first, like what are our priorities that we really want to accomplish? It seems like that's the most important question. And
Do we want to simplify the questions? Like
That's what I
just
was
to
gonna
like do more of, do less of, stop kind of a thing? Like I would love to see more of this. I would love to see less of this, or I don't want to see this.
I wouldn't use that word aspiration. That's a little bit, reword that somehow. I don't know. That seems, because not everybody knows what that means. So if you say it in a different way, where especially like the community, if you give that to the community, a lot of the people will not know necessarily what that means. So like if you want to make it simpler, so like everybody will understand it. That's just a suggestion, like the wording there, make it more a simple way to say it, not that people don't know that word, but some people don't. So
Like
they might not.
overthinking the interpretation, but I like your suggestion where it's like, here's things I love, here's things I don't love. And then from that you glean stuff from, like, I don't love that I can't come at 11 p.m. at night, but.
Well, and all I'm actually talking about right now is not the community, just the board and the staff part. So-
Maybe another thing would be to make the time frame more concrete, to say, what, changes or improvements, or I don't know how you want to phrase it, something would you like to see happen to this library within the next 3 years, let's say, like, just to kind of make it concrete that, what we're really interested in.
Has anybody ever done a SWOT exercise? You ever done,
Yeah.
do you not like it?
No, it's just, I actually like the SWOT analysis, but.
I don't know. I only did it once. I was on a task force for something and I didn't find it
Strength,
particularly
weaknesses,
useful.
opportunities,
Yeah.
threats. It can sometimes get redundant, but yeah, I think it's.
I haven't done a lot of it, but I was gonna say the categories are kind of similar to what Corey's already asked, but is that a more specific way to get the staff and the board thinking about, like, strengths is kind of like, what do you want to aspire to? What are we doing well? Weaknesses might be like, How did somebody phrase it?
Like, what are we doing that, but we're not doing it super great?
Yeah.
We're already doing it, but it's not.
The opportunities might be those aspirational things like, I see really great partnerships if we just did this. And then the threats are like, what are we competing with in a way or?
So I don't mean to cut you off. We technically have 1 minute left. I'm very much an on-time person. Does everybody, can we stay for 5 more minutes and just get to the conclusion of this?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So you're talking more broad strokes, but more in line with the SWOT analysis. So like it's essentially a 4-question thing. Or we can.
Hey, Corey?
Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
I just wanted to say, I think it's really important that the board hears from the people that actually work there first. You know, what are your dreams for the next 3 years for the library? You know, sort of that generalized question. And after that's gathered, you know, then take a look at that and say, well, you know, fiscally, is this going to be possible? You know, sort of our role there. But as I said, I really think that the people that work there are the ones that are going to have the ideas of the library community, you know, and then when we go and meet with the public, hopefully that would be like a morning session, afternoon session, evening session. You know, we can shoot out what we and the staff have sort of envisioned and, you know, ask them if it fits their needs.
So would you suggest surveying the staff then before we do any additional surveying or activities with the board? Is that what you're proposing, Barbara?
Yeah, I would like to see, you know, what the staff envisions first. Because as I said, you know, they're on the ground every day. And you know, I think I'd like to see what their thoughts are.
Okay.
Do you anticipate that influencing how the board will then answer? Would it make sense to do it concurrently and then just assess all the results at the same time and see if we are just way off track? Because that might just also signal like that the board is not aligned with what's going on at the library, just as a general like flag that comes up, totally separate. But that's where I would think that'd be interesting, because I feel like if we see that we're just way off track, something that might come out of that is one of our goals is, hey, how do we connect with the staff better so that we are aligned on things like that? Just a thought.
I have a proposal that sort of incorporates both those things at the same time, which is if we're going to consider doing a survey and an activity again. So if we're going to do both those pieces, the activity piece can use the results from both. So we can see separately, but so the staff would be able to select from priorities that come out of the board survey, and the board would also be able to select from priorities that come out of the staff survey. And that may help us like come to a better informed conclusion.
Like that.
Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes. So the
Bill, you're silent. Is this silent disagreement?
I'm not sure I followed everything that you said.
So if we survey both at the same time and say 3 things that come into the staff are like, we want better hours, we want more pay,
Right.
we want whatever it is, you know, the third things. And this board says, we want a new cafe, we want the book sheds, we want this, but we put all 6 of those things and allow the staff to vote on all 6 and the board to vote on all 6. So you're seeing not just the board's responses, but also the staff's, and the staff would see theirs, the board's, without it being identified as to which group it came from. To see if there's more alignment than we think, or if it is totally the staff voted on their own ideas, the board voted on their own ideas. I think I may need to draw a map.
It's like somebody neutral looking to gather both at once and then put out a document where nobody
It's
has
a weird,
seen
yeah.
who submitted what. Intriguing.
Or they just recuse themselves from voting, like whoever puts it together just doesn't vote.
Yeah.
Right. Because I mean, the interesting thing that came from looking at the previous document was seeing that disconnect in between what people prioritize, which I think is interesting and valuable. But for the purposes of just getting all the ideas on the table,
Mhm.
we don't need to see that information. We don't need to know that the board said more hours and the staff said fewer. We just need to know that the people said more hours.
I like it.
Other thoughts? I mean, like, do we think that this is something we can realistically start soon, like this coming month? Or do we need one more meeting to sort of coalesce around like our ideas of starting this process and then launch into it? Okay.
This was a lot of information all at once.
In between though, on the internet, when is the New York Library Association meeting?
Oh, the conference,
Yeah.
it's next week.
So, I'm very big on what the rest of the library world is basically saying. The new ideas for long-range planning are, if you can bring them back and maybe
Oh,
have some of our
absolutely.
next meeting, any insights from Wizards and other places.
It's great ideas everywhere, yeah, for sure.
And you're attending part of it? Are you attending, Christina?
No, some of my staff are.
Okay,
I believe there's 4 of
I'm
us.
gonna try and go on Saturday because I think there's more trustees stuff on Saturday. Are you going, Mike?
I might want to go to.
Yeah, okay. So maybe we can have some. We'll gather notes. Do we think that we could meet? Not like next week, but in like 2 or 3 weeks so that we could have some information and be prepared to like send this perhaps after Thanksgiving, but before the like Christmas and holidays. Is that a realistic timeline?
It has to be before December 8th. I'm out for a week, December 8th through
Okay.
whatever 7 days after that is. 15th? I can't.
In general, do Tuesdays at 5:30 work well for committee members?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me do a little checking and I will pull everybody. I'm gonna send along my notes. I'm going to offer a visual explanation of what I mean about the survey because I realized my explanation was confusing and then we'll regroup. Bill, thanks for sending along the census data. That's the only thing that I had on the last point. And I did do a quick compilation based on some numbers. There's one that I cannot figure out.
You're pretty good because I was trying to do that last night, but I.
I love numbers, Bill.
Taking notes, it's close enough.
So, but yeah, so we can talk through that next time we meet too and see how the process.
Yeah, those statistics were interesting.
So, any final thoughts?
Nah.
Thank you all. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. Sorry if anyone.
You're welcome.
Being on this committee.
Saw those.